just a little bit of preliminary information. So for the committee, and Tanner, you can go ahead and start working to get us live. Each of you has a packet of the interim topics that were submitted by both people on the committee, outside the committee, and we have 28 pages of them, and that's not all of them, believe me. I have more. Those are the ones that were submitted through the correct process. So we will meet Wednesday at noon with our counterparts from the Senate to go over these. I know you may have other meetings. If you do, that's fine. And as you know, with interim topics, not all of these will go through. Some of you have already talked to me about what you feel are your most important topics, and we will try to get those because you sat through an interim with what this committee's been doing and have a really good idea of the direction you want the committee to continue in. So just give you a heads up, it'll be announced, but we will meet Wednesday at noon. And that I hope everyone can make it, and I will let my good co-chair know with that. And he is at another committee presenting bills, so if I need to step out or anything, I'll designate Representative Knapp as acting vice chair, if that's okay with him. He's already vice chair on some other committees, so he'll be the one to handle it. With that, I think that's all the preliminary stuff I have, and we will take these in the order they were posted. So go ahead and call the roll, Mark.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Conrad.
Here.
Representative Heiner. Representative Knapp.
Heiner is excused.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Tarver. Here. Representative Western. Here. Chairman Burkhart.
Here.
Thank you.
And Tanner, we are live? Okay, thank you. So just some preliminary reminder, I see some new faces in here. Please remember to address your questions through the chair. Keep it civil and nice, and we'll all get along fine. I don't think I need to give any other preambles to this. And with that, Representative Western, why don't you tell us about Senate File 52? And I can tell this session you have really enjoyed sitting at that table.
Mr. Chairman, it's just the Minerals Committee is such a delight, I just can't help myself.
Okay, and we're glad for that.
Mr. Chairman, Cyrus Western, House District 51. I present to you Senate File 52. It's one that we worked on the Select Blockchain Committee in the interim that my co-chair and I, which, Christian, Mr. Co-Chair, do you want to join me so it's not so lonely up here? Preventing for such an intimidating committee.
I would have let him stew alone.
I've done it before.
Okay, yes, we know.
But,
So Representative, Senator, both of you, please proceed as you wish.
yeah, just to provide the committee a little bit of background information, I believe it was last year, we passed the Wyoming Stable Token Act, right? And enabling, setting up a commission and enabling our treasurer and our chief executive to, kind of start that process of standing up a stable token, right? Kind of the whole idea behind it is obviously there's, the digital asset world has expanded a ton. I want to say, and my co-chair might correct me, but right now there's about $700 billion worth of stable tokens or those types of financial assets right now. And that number is only going to go one direction. So the idea behind the act was, I think that we have a very unique opportunity as a state, as a sovereign state to seize that opportunity that we've kind of done in the last couple of years. So that's the background. During the interim, we worked this bill. There were some amendments that came up through that process in consultation with the commission. The commission's director is here today, so he can obviously help fill in some of those gaps for the committee. But there were a handful of just amendments that we wanted to bring forward to the original Stable Token Act that we passed last year that can help the commission and kind of button things up. And so, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to maybe just kind of go through the bill a little bit, if that's okay.
Please.
So, starting at page 2, and I believe my co-chairman might be able to speak a little more articulately on this, but we brought some amendments for the bidding process, and really one of the big things also that the bill does, and that's what it talks about there on page 2, sections A, B, and C. And then if we go over to page 3, there's some issues with, hiring personnel and allowing for background checks and coordination between, between DCI, and making sure, obviously, we want to have people who can pass a background check working for the commission. We updated some of the definitions and of course, some amendments to the powers of the commission, and ensuring, giving them the language that they need so that they can set up the commission accordingly. And one of the interesting things I think is on page 5 is the accounts. We did some amendments around the type of securities that they can collateralize with these tokens to include, treasury bonds or cash equivalent assets, such as repurchase agreements, reverse repurchase agreements. That language was drafted in consultation with the treasurer's office, because they basically said, hey, there's some risk-free assets that we can invest that yield a better return, but again, have that risk-free or near risk-free profile that we need to have when we collateralize some of these tokens. So, Mr. Co-Chairman, do you want to jump in there if I miss anything?
Senator, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and we do have Commissioner Pope here, as well as mentioned, Executive Director Anthony Apollo, that can answer some of the discussion on the Stable Token Commission on where these amendments came from. But this is effectively a little bit of cleanup and then a little bit of policy tweak to better implement based on what the Wyoming Stable Token has discussed during the interim. No major changes to policy, but one of the key provisions really is what we see on page 2 with the bidding requirements. This is similar to how the Wyoming Lottery Commission has statutory authority to provide some flexibility in the bidding requirements. Still a transparent bidding process, but not necessarily working through the formal RFP process, providing a little more flexibility. And I'd remind the committee that the way the Stable Token Commission turned out, it is chaired by the governor in person and has the treasurer and the auditor as the executive branch members as well. So when they're taking action in a public meeting, that's about as solid and transparent of a group as you're going to get, and has executive authority. So rather than having them have to outsource back through the full RFP process, there was some interest in trying to make sure that we could put together the incredible number of pieces that were necessary to implement the Wyoming Stable Token Act a little bit more efficiently than would otherwise have to be done through the traditional process. On page 3, as Representative Western mentioned, this is just cleanup. There was no statutory authority, even though there was a requirement that there be background checks for all of the individuals on the commission and employees of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. You had to have statutory authority in Title VII to allow for those background checks, so that's cleanup. Page 4, a slight amount of cleanup up on the top. The language in C paragraph 1 relates to overcoming some potential concerns with how the SEC might interpret language that implies a limitation on the number of tokens, where with the Wyoming Stable Token, you'll simply have a no ceiling, no limit, where the number of tokens issued will be equivalent to the number of dollars that come in. And the implication of including the overall number or the number of Wyoming Stable Tokens to be issued would imply that there was a cap, and that was a concern from a security standpoint, that we were trying to make sure that there was absolute clarity on how this would be managed. So you see, we just tweaked the language to indicate including the types of Wyoming Stable Tokens to be issued, the supply characteristics for each type, which could imply then a limitless issuance. Bottom of page 4 onto page 5, you see that we have financial institutions listed that may be contracted with, but there will be a need for financial service providers. These could be auditors, these could be entities that provided temporary custody, provided wallets, acting as exchange, but are not qualified under Wyoming statute as financial institutions. And so we wanted to clarify that that was allowable. And then the language in the E paragraph before, it was originally issuing any Wyoming Stable Token. Now it's before publicly issuing any fully reserved Wyoming Stable Token. There will be a beta phase on test nets for any issuance, and we wanted to make it very clear that that was not precluded by this statute. So we restructured the language a little bit there to make sure that it's talking about the real issuance as opposed to kind of the beta testing phase when there aren't dollars backing it. And then, yeah, the flexibility, as my co-chairman mentioned at the bottom, you'll recall that all of the issuance would be into treasury bills. That's the original structure. This is functionally equivalent, but with a little bit different language that provides for much greater liquidity at the request of our chief investment officer and the treasurer's office, their suggestions. So obviously we need to have cash. That was implied, but now we're making that explicit. But changing the language, tweaking it from United States Treasury bills to United States Treasury securities with a maturity of 365 days or less, or United States Treasury security repurchase agreements with a term of 30 days or less, provides substantially higher liquidity without actually changing the risk profile of the underlying asset. And it gets into a little nuance that probably isn't appropriate for the floor, but maybe worth noting here. If you have a 10-year treasury bond, for example, but it only has 100 days left, that has the same risk profile as a treasury bill with 100 days left and probably has the same value. But if we say treasury bills, you can't purchase that on a secondary market. If we say it as we said it here, you could buy that asset and again, dramatically increasing the liquidity because you can now use secondary markets with a maturity date within 365 days as opposed to an initial maturity of 365 days or less. And the repurchase agreements provide the most liquidity, and that is effectively how banks move in and out of cash into treasuries on an overnight basis. And we wanted to make sure that they had the same capacity without increasing the risk. So hope you'll support this. It's certainly necessary to fulfill the work that we've been doing, the ongoing work. And I'll just note for the Minerals Committee that the work of the Stable Token Commission has truly been exceptional during the interim. Since last time, they've done a tremendous job and are making incredible progress. We hope to have tokens issued before we meet again.
Okay, any questions for Representative Conrad?
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. A question, if I may, to the representative and the senator, specifically as it relates to the background checks. On page 3, line 5, criminal history record. Specifically, does that require or do not require the FBI for the criminal background check?
Representative, Senator?
Mr. Chairman, so when we have in statute authorized criminal history backgrounds that go through the FBI that are allowed to utilize the FBI, but the FBI doesn't like to do those unless it's effectively mandated through statute. So this is a provision that authorizes it in a way that we could utilize the FBI. I'd have to look to the executive director to see if we require that as part of it. We work through DCI certainly, and I'm not sure whether DCI always goes for that FBI background or not, but we ran into problems without this language because DCI and the FBI and the feds basically said, well, we don't want to.
Follow up.
Follow up.
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. Because I do know as we look back most recently as a year or maybe less than a year, the Custodia bank issue. And I think at that point, they clearly denoted, in this case, the FBI, they did not want anything. And in fact, they turned down statutory language as related to background checks in the past. So that's why I asked the question. And also, how does this impact, positive or negative, or is it non-applicable as it relates to the Custodio Bank lawsuit, which the state of Wyoming has adjoined kind of on the periphery? And I'll stop there and ask a follow-up later.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
With regard to Custodia, this really has nothing to do with Custodia. That obviously is work that stems from our Speedy Bank work, but this legislation and the Wyoming Stable Token are unrelated to the Custodia lawsuit.
Other questions?
Follow-up?
Follow up, go ahead.
Thanks. The last question is, what is the risk to the consumer, or more importantly, someone who engages in this? Are they guaranteed at least the money they input or invest, say dollar-wise, down to $1? are they gonna be able to get that back? I mean, my real question is, Senator, what is the risk to the consumer, or more importantly, the residents of the state?
Either?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, I think it's a great question. I wish we could pull up the video that when we passed the original Stable Token Act, but in essence, it's the way, if we go back and you look through the statutes, and I think it's through the rest of Chapter 31 and Title 40, the idea is if you give someone $1, you get $1 worth of the stable token, and that some of the amendments that we made right there on page 5 in Section 106 enable the Treasury to invest in assets that generate some type of return, like for a repurchase agreement or some of those short maturity Treasury securities that are risk-free or virtually risk-free, so that in the event that, let's say someone says, hey, I've got, I don't know, 1 million stable tokens, I want to redeem those for dollars, that they can turn right around, liquidate those securities, and give that customer, their tokens back in US dollars. So, I mean, I can't say it's virtually risk-free, right? But it's pretty low risk, right? Because if you look at, for example, like what happened with Circle, which had gotten into some trouble, and some of those other ones, that we can obviously go deeper, they were collateralizing those with assets that weren't highly liquid, right? That they couldn't turn right around and liquidate for at a minimum of face value, so they could give that customer back their money. And so that's why I think we put some really tight sideboards on ensuring that whatever the treasurer or the treasurer does invest in, that these are assets that again, like I said, 100 days or less, or 100 days or more, or a year or less, that they can turn around and liquidate almost immediately, so they can fulfill that redemption order for whether it's for 1 coin, 1,000 coins, or 1 million coins, or tokens, excuse me.
Back on a little bit.
Senator, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if I can follow up, we also have a minimum of 102% reserve once this gets going. And it is with the intent of not just having dollar for dollar, but literally having more than dollar for dollar on the off chance that there is a run, and ensuring that we have sufficient liquidity to meet even a run circumstance. And we'll have a more sophisticated process of, what is the instantaneous liquidated value of the reserve fund, and then try and keep that above 100%, so that if there were a full run, which will not happen, but let's, worst case scenario type concept, what would be the instantaneous value of those treasury bills, the treasury assets that underlie, plus the cash, and make sure that that is sufficient to pay off 100% of the dollars that are outstanding. So the state won't have any exposure beyond what's in the trust, but we will have the trust dollars higher than the actual outstanding value of the token dollars to further protect beyond even what my co-chairman said. And that structure of evaluating the instantaneous liquidity and the number of outstanding dollars, the intent is to have continuous monitoring of that, so that anybody in the public can see what am I holding for assets, what's the instantaneous value of those assets, and what are the number of outstanding tokens, so that there can, and that will be independently verified and audited effectively to ensure that there is sufficient worth there. And then at the end of the day, of course, if you're not in a hurry, then you've got the underlying asset of the treasury bill is going to provide a true dollar for dollar, unless the federal government collapses. But treasury bills have never gone negative. Treasury bills themselves, other treasury notes have, but treasury bills have never gone negative. So we built in a tremendous amount of consumer protection, far beyond what I think any other similar asset has.
Representative Lawley, or I'm sorry, Representative Conrad, did you
My
have another
apologies, just
follow-up?
one last final.
And before you do, though, I will remind everyone, we have 2 additional bills to consider. We go in at 10 o'clock, and so I'd ask you to be concise with your questions and your answers, please.
Wyoming is the first, correct? Thank you.
Okay, Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And whichever one of you would like to answer this question, on page 6, line 3, it says the state does not create any fiduciary duty to token holders. By the creation of this trust, the state does not create any fiduciary duty to token holders. Would you mind telling me why that you put it that way? And then in addition to that, when someone would purchase these, are they going to be required to sign some kind of disclosure statement?
Representative or Senator, and
So on the
Just for process first, remember that is already in statute.
Right.
We aren't debating changes on that, so.
On the fiduciary duty side, we are not looking out for the interest of a token holder. We are all we are doing is holding that dollar in trust on their behalf, and then all yield comes back to the state. This is not an investment, and this is not us managing the money of a token holder. This is us ensuring that we will provide a dollar back. That is the intent of us not creating any type of fiduciary duty. We do not want to be responsible fiscally, the state of Wyoming, for management of their assets, so to speak. So that's the implication there. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative.
if I might, thank you. Representative Lawley, part of the, also the discussion, that we had, some of our good appropriators and the members of that committee, had some heartburn about, well, if we don't have that type of language in there, then we could potentially be, on the hook from a liability standpoint. And if you look at just the fiduciary requirements at the federal level, so they were quite adamant, if we go back to last year, about ensuring that they do have that type of language so that the state couldn't potentially have this, 7, 8, 9-figure liability on their books from a fiduciary standpoint. So that's a little context of how that discussion went down.
And Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'll note,
Yes.
language like that occurs at least 5 times in that act. That was the ultimate belt and suspenders that was insisted upon, and we were comfortable with that.
Okay. Other questions? Questions? Okay. So with that, I think before I open public comment, if the commission would like to come up, if you have any input on this. And just a reminder, please be concise. We're burning daylight, as the saying goes. And for the record, please identify yourself and then proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Anthony Apollo. I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, joined by
David Pope, I'm a certified public accountant and one of the subject matter experts that is serving on the commission.
Mr. Chairman.
Proceed.
Thank you very much. I will keep this quite brief. To quickly go through some of the questions that have been raised already, there is in the initial version of the Stable Token Act a requirement that any of the subject matter experts, like Commissioner Pope, and the executive director will be required to furnish their fingerprints to the Federal Bureau of Investigation or any governmental agency or entity authorized to receive fingerprints. We have all been printed. Secondly, I just want to kind of double click on the question around the ability for consumers to redeem stable tokens for $1. Senator Rothfuss has already mentioned the 102% reserve. So again, we'd have a buffer over and above the number of Wyoming stable tokens outstanding in terms of the dollars or the treasuries that we're holding. That is something that no other stable token provider has. And as just another piece of context, the governor has asked us at one of our meetings to perhaps, as a matter of policy, not statute, to bump that number up as fiscally things may change along the way. Another big piece of the actual amendments in front of you is the procurement piece and the part where we would do our own competitive bidding process. Some of that comes from the reality of the situation we find ourselves in terms of the number of teams that are interested in supporting us and helping us build out the initial Wyoming stable token. For context, we've done 2 back-to-back requests for information periods, one in November and one from late December through where we are now, actually wrapping up this afternoon. During that process, myself and the commissioners have talked to over 270 people across more than 100 companies who are interested in building with us. And quite candidly, the process that exists now through ANI is not built to support that amount of inbound. So again, we've got language here that looks a lot like what the Lottery Commission has, what the Energy Authority does. That would give us a bit more flexibility in that capacity. Again, it would be a highly public process overseen by the governor, treasurer, auditor, and the commission. And I think I will pause there just for the sake of time, and happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Any questions for the commission? Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. So with that, I will open it to public comment. Let's see, anyone from another agency? No? Okay, any other representative legislators? Okay, anyone from the public? Anyone online? I don't have a sign-up sheet. Anyone want to speak to Senate File 52 engrossed? Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Western,
Second.
seconded by Conrad. Discussion on the bill. Okay, so, one moment. Any amendments on the bill? Page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? No amendments, no discussion. Committee? Question being called. Mark, would you please take roll? We're voting on Senate File 52 engrossed Wyoming Stable Token Act amendments.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
I have Heiners.
Okay,
Representative Knapp.
excused.
No.
Heiner's excused.
Yes.
Okay.
Representative Larson,
He's excused, but keep the vote open until he gets back. I'll explain that in a minute.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver. Aye. Representative Western. Aye. Chairman Burkhart.
Aye. Okay. And just, we can keep the vote open, but as you know, I close it when we adjourn the meeting. So one thing with Representative Larson, just to explain what has been going on. One of the bills we had on Friday, we made numerous amendments to that bill back and forth, and they were kind of confusing. And we think staff may have gotten the amendments wrong. So it was Representative Larson's amendment that they're working on. So he's off running, trying to track that down. As most of you know, I'm pretty much a stickler to make sure we get those amendments right when they leave committee. So that's, if you've wondered, that's what it is going on. So nothing nefarious. So other than Representative Larson gets to be the messenger on this one. So it was his amendment. So with that, next bill for our consideration is Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management Definitions Amendment. And we have the good sponsor with us. Senator, just proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. Eric Barlow, Senate District 23. It's good to see you this morning. So Senate File 80 is I guess you could call it, for lack of a better term, a regulatory reduction bill. It actually is exempting a particular type of recycling from the solid waste management statutes. So as you'll see from the bill, Mr. Chairman, and the bill is, if we'll just walk through the bill very quickly, page 2 of the bill is, in Title 35, Chapter 11, definitions. And what we're doing is we're adding a new exception to what solid waste is. So again, solid waste is on line 5, but line 10 does not include any of the following. And as you'll note, there are 3 above this, A, B, and C. A and C aren't there, but D is the new language. And D is a activity, a type of recycling that is becoming more and more practiced, and it is using different types of processes. Other times we think about recycling as just grinding and repurposing materials in their raw form. Now we're talking about different types of processes, and you'll see those here, or you see this here, and then you'll see the definition as you go to the next page further down of what advanced recycling is. And basically what we're talking about is taking a product and converting it using different kinds of processes into a base product, feedstocks, if you will. And most of these are hydrocarbon based. So we're talking about plastics, polyethylenes, HDPEs, things like that. So taking those things, in our country, if you're familiar with some of the oil and gas activity, we take a lot of HDPE, we grind it, we turn it into something, we send it off. This would actually break it down further, take it into some more basic components and used for higher grade of recycling. So that's what this bill does. Like I said, it's an opportunity. So why might this be important in Wyoming? There's probably 3 reasons. One, it's a new opportunity for some of our industrial industries already here. Two, we have full trains leaving and empty trains coming back. Coal trains, Trona, et cetera. They could be bringing these materials from other places. And we have industrial sites. Northeast Wyoming, we have coal facilities, industrial sites. Southeast, in the central, along the UP, we have other industrial sites, including chemical plants, et cetera. So it seemed to be a nice fit for variety of reasons in Wyoming. So, Mr. Chairman, if you will, and just for the committee's knowledge, if you take a look at Article 5 of the same chapter, this is all the solid waste management things, and this would not be a part of that. They would not fall under solid waste, i.e. landfill, for these type of facilities. So if they had byproducts that need to go to landfill, that's different. But the products that they're bringing in would not be considered waste under the current statute. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. It does allow some rulemaking for the Environmental Quality Council. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Okay, questions for the sponsor? Any questions? Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow, you sound like part of this is a regulatory reduction component, but was there any specific facility or operations going on in your country that spurned this? Or is this kind of more of like, hey, if we can get this wording right, we might be able to attract some new businesses?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the question, there certainly is a lot of interest in Northeast Wyoming to reuse some of our coal facilities as industrial sites. That has multiple advantages. One, there's already a rail spur, there's already buildings, et cetera, et cetera. The second one, and you'll see some proponents come up for the bill, Mr. Chairman, well, I know they're in the room. There are large companies, hydrocarbon companies and other companies that do have an interest and are looking for places to bring this. So is there a specific ask by a specific company? No. Is it an opportunity that multiple companies may be interested, and we have some of those resources, materials handling facilities, et cetera, in Wyoming, not just Northeast, but the UP is also, would be ideal as well. So that's where this comes from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Other questions for the sponsor? All right, no other questions? Okay, with that, I will go to public testimony, and I guess ask, does the department have any comments first? Ms. Engels, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Suzanne Ingles. I'm the administrator for the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division at the Department of Environmental Quality. As the sponsor of the bill pointed out, this bill amends the definition for solid waste and solid waste management facilities and provides definitions for advanced recycling and advanced recycling facilities. The agency understands that there's 24 other states with similar legislation in place. And with this exemption, it would eliminate the requirement for a solid waste permit at one of these facilities. And currently, those permitting requirements include the facility to meet location standards, provide financial assurance, and then it also provides an opportunity for public comment. However, with this exemption, that permit requirement goes away, and the facility would still be subject to air quality division requirements as well as any applicable water quality division requirements. Beyond that, the agency did not see any items problematic with the proposed bill, and with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Engel? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other legislators wish to speak? Governor's office? Okay, with that, anyone else wish to speak on Senate File 80? Mr. Beggar, please identify yourself. We know who you are, but you know the drill.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jason Beggar, and today I'm here on behalf of the American Chemistry Council. And as the previous speaker mentioned, there's 24 other states that have passed similar legislation, and this is a national objective for the association. And really what they're trying to do is bring regulatory standards up to par to meet a new technology that just wasn't available, many years ago when these regulations were put in place. And, really what they're trying to do here is find and encourage new ways to recycle plastics. If you look at the bottom of, your water bottle or things, there's usually a number on there that tells you what that plastic is and how it can be recycled. And for a lot of those types of plastics that can be recycled, it's simply, you grind it up, you melt it down, you reform it into something else. There's a lot of plastics out there that are not easily recyclable. Things like pharmaceutical packaging, cellophanes, food packaging, things like that. And right now, that stuff is just currently landfilled. And so by using gasification, pyrolysis, different types of basically heat and pressure, you can break those hydrocarbon chains down to its basic form, gasification. This legislative body has talked a lot about coal gasification and things, and it's in the same family. And so once you break that down into that syngas, you can then use that as feedstock to recreate plastics and other projects. And so given, some of the other activities in the state, a facility like this could co-locate really well with, some of the other economic development activities within Wyoming. So with that, just looking to regulate these types of facilities differently. It doesn't mean, just because we're not getting a solid waste permit anymore, as was mentioned, it would be treated like a manufacturer facility, and they're subject to all the appropriate and applicable rules, regulations, and permits that go along with that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Beggar? Any questions? So, Mr. Beggar, just to be clear, one thing with this is that all the various types of plastic, little number on the bottom of the plastic containers, this water cup has one. Those would not need to be separated. They could all just go through the facility. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, as a non-chemical engineer, I would be hesitant to say with certainty, but my belief is that you could commingle different types of plastics so long as it met certain standards.
Okay, all right. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beggar, obviously I've read a lot about how people talk about, recycle plastics, it's good for the environment. It just ends up in a burn pit in, Lahore or one of those places in India, right, where they get to suffer from all the pollutants and toxins and all that stuff. My question is, could this type of stuff eventually lead to a more efficient process to truly actually recycle some of those hard to recycle plastics?
Mr. Beggar?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Western, these types of processes are actually being used within the United States in certain locations already. And that's the whole idea, is trying to reduce waste so it doesn't end up in places where you have much lower, environmental standards, or landfills, or even worse, you see trash blowing all over all over the landscape, or ending up in, bodies of water in the ocean and things like that. So, like any technology, it gets better over time, but from a chemistry perspective, and again, getting a little bit outside my wheelhouse, it sounds like it's a fairly known process.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Beggar. Okay, anyone else want to speak on Senate File 80? Anyone? Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee?
The bill.
Moved by Larson, seconded by Lawley. Discussion on the bill. Oh, okay, before we get to the question, so one thing, I've talked to one of the large petroleum companies that's already here in Wyoming, and they're very interested in this. I've encouraged them to consider Wyoming to do this, and what they tell me is they will take the plastics, whatever they are, break them down into their molecular compounds, and then recombine them. So You know, and the one thing we have going for us here is plenty of natural gas to do this, plus the railroad system as infrastructure to get it out of Wyoming, someplace where they can turn it into bottles again, or clothing, or the body of this pen, or any number of things. So, all right, question having been called, unless there's any other comments. Okay, question having been called, Mark, would you please call roll?
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Excused.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver, Representative Western, Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Do pass. 9-0.
All right. Senator Barlow, do you have someone to floor manage this for you in the House?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I don't have anybody particular in mind. If somebody wants to volunteer, that'd be great. I kind of, as you said, I kind of had Northeast type folks and Southwest type folks on it. So because of the proximity to the potential site location, so.
Well, three of your co-sponsors are on this committee,
Yeah,
so.
and I'll let them arm wrestle because they're all tougher than me, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Representative Western.
I nominate Representative Larson to floor manage this one.
Representative Larson, do you accept that? Okay, so you have your floor sponsor. Okay, thank you. So, Mark, we'll go back to, Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments has passed the Minerals Committee. And Mark, we will go back to Senate File 52, please. I left that open for Representative Larson. So, Representative Larson, your vote on Senate File 52.
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Do you want me to announce on that?
What was that, Mark? I'm sorry.
That would be a do pass.
Okay.
8-2.
Thank you. So Senate File 52, engrossed Wyoming Stable Token Act amendments has passed the committee, and I will assume that wherever Representative Western went, he is floor managing this one. Well, if he didn't know it, he is now. Thank you. Okay. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 114, Contractor Licenses Reciprocal Recognition Requirements. And another one from good Senator Rothfuss, and he brought help with him. Backup. So Senator Rothfuss, Senator Guru, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll start and let the heavy bat come in later. This is Senate File 114 came to us from a number of different sources. Actually, it's of interest to the first floor, and it's been talked about in Regulatory Reduction Task Force, which I'm the co-chair with the good co-chair Nicholas from the House. And it's just something that we've been kicking around. So this bill was filed, and we've taken it through the process so far. We've gotten a lot of input from local municipalities. We've gotten a lot of input from labor, and we've gotten input from contractors, all of which have been incorporated into the bill as it now stands before you. And so with that, Senator Rothfuss will walk through the bill, and then we'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the bill is a pretty straightforward reciprocity. You see on page 2, we've got the concept of an accepting jurisdiction and an issuing jurisdiction. The issuing jurisdiction is that county, city, or town that issues the license to a contractor, and the accepting is then going to be where they operate. The intent of the bill is effectively to ensure that any contractor in the state of Wyoming that is a licensed contractor is going to be able to operate in any other jurisdiction in the state without having to go jump through all of the hoops again, recognizing that you don't want to have every contractor have 23 county licenses and 99 municipality licenses. It just doesn't make regulatory sense. So this legislation addresses that, but also puts in place, at the request of many cities, towns, and counties, as well as contractors, some requirements of what those licenses need to look like to be appropriate for reciprocity. I think it's in good shape with that addition. You see the key language is at the bottom of page 2. The B paragraph, each county, city, town, and other government entity that issues licenses to contractors shall recognize a license issued to a contractor by another county, city, town, or other government entity in Wyoming in accordance with the following, and there's some key provisions here. In the Romanet 1, you see that before the issuing jurisdiction shall recognize the license under this section, the contractor's license shall be active. And some key language here that we added, the contractor shall be in good standing with the issuing jurisdiction and shall provide to the accepting jurisdiction any proof of financial assurance required by the accepting jurisdiction. So that's bonding and insurance requirements. That's what we're getting at there. And that was one of the desired provisions to ensure that there was adequate bonding and insurance in place prior to requiring acceptance. So equivalence is sufficient. Romanet 2, and oddly that Romanet 2 on my draft looks like it's over too far. I don't quite know what's going on there. Gets to what those certificates need to look like. And this was another addition that I'm hoping that everyone is now satisfied with this language. It's good language that we received from some of the contracting organizations statewide. The contractor shall provide proof of the successful completion of the International Code Council examination for contractor, plumbing, mechanical, or another appropriate examination or an equivalent. And then below gets to similar equivalencies for fire-related contracting. So contractors seeking to have a license recognized by an accepting jurisdiction for fire system installation will have the appropriate certifications in the rest of the paragraph. And so that is ensuring that these licenses that are reciprocal are high-quality licenses that meet international standards. And they're not just, I signed on the back of a napkin, you're licensed, and therefore you're good to go. Romanet 3 on page 4 indicates that what information shall be required to receive the reciprocity when you're making that request. Romanet 4, the accepting jurisdiction may require a contractor to provide proof sufficient for the accepting jurisdiction to confirm the contractor's license is active and in good standing. Romanet 5 allows that the accepting jurisdiction may deny a contractor recognition of a license if the contractor has previously had a license revoked or suspended by the accepting jurisdiction, which just makes sense. And then on to page 5, the final Romanet, nothing in this subsection shall be construed to require an accepting jurisdiction to grant privileges for a class that they're not qualified in. And then the B, prohibit any accepting jurisdiction from requiring a contractor to complete applications for skills that are not covered by their licensing. We see the C paragraph at the bottom of page 5. Nothing in this subsection shall be construed to prohibit any county, city, town, or other government entity that issues licenses to contractors from entering into agreements for the recognition of licenses obtained in other jurisdictions. In other words, this is not a preemption necessarily to other agreements of reciprocity. It just provides reciprocity based on the circumstances that are given here. So this is a nice little deregulation bill, good small government bill, should help our contractors, but we worked hard to engage with our cities and counties, as well as our contracting organizations, to make sure that we've got good consumer protection in place here and that we're representing the interests of our communities.
Questions, Representative Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on page 3 and continuing on to page 4, that requirement for the International Code Council. So does that have the potential to put existing licenses that don't meet that requirement out of business in a sense, or they have to come up to compliance at this point? I guess that's my question.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, no, this is only for the reciprocity to be applied. So if a jurisdiction does not utilize those standards at this point in time, they can continue to license as they see fit. There's nothing about how you shall license, but that entity's license then, if it's falling below these standards, would not be recognized by another jurisdiction through the reciprocity agreement. So it probably provides a little guideline that, hey, if you're not doing this, maybe you'll want to, so that your licensed contractors would be accepted elsewhere. I will note that the Wyoming Association of Municipalities has a standard license approach for these also that is ICC compliant. So an awful lot of communities already fall into this bin.
Representative Conrad.
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. Just a clarifying question for me. Is this only for Wyoming contractors or contractors that are out of state but have a Wyoming license? So one is based in, say, Cheyenne versus one based in Salt Lake.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I think as written, it's only for Wyoming. I'm just going to double check that language. Yeah. So this is bottom of page 2 and on the top of page 3. The final clause on page 3 is that license is issued by an entity in Wyoming in accordance with the following. So no obligation to recognize an out-of-state without them having to apply for an in-state permit. Although, once they had one in-state permit issued, then that would be potentially reciprocal in other jurisdictions. So if they are a Colorado contractor and they received a permit, a license, I should say, in Cheyenne here that is compliant, then that should work throughout the rest of the state.
Just follow-up clarifying question. Chairman Burkhart, yeah, that was my concern because a lot of, at least in the Southwest area, we can't find contractors and we have to pull them out of, in this case, Salt Lake City and or other areas. So that was helpful, so thank you.
Other questions? Other questions? Excuse me. So Senator, I have one, and again, on page 3, Romanet 2, I noticed that electrical is not included in there. Was there a particular reason for that? Because, I mean, all the contractors right now are in such great demand. It seems electrical contractors more than most, and depending on your community. If that was just an oversight, or is there a particular reason, considering that electrical contractors already have to have a state license?
Mr. Chairman, I think you'll have some public testimony by folks that carefully put this together, and the ICC code, I don't think actually addresses electrical certification. So that's a question I would recommend putting to them. If there is an appropriate way to add that here, they'll know it better than we will. And I think it's a good point, but there's probably some nuances there that I'm not aware of.
Okay, all right, we'll see when we get those. Other questions? All right, so, okay. So, any other questions? Okay, with that, I'll open public comment, and come on up, whoever wants to speak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Kelly Little with the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. AGC of Wyoming is in support of this bill. We did have concerns when it was first drafted about, you've heard a lot of conversation from Senator Rothfuss about that minimum level of competency to be reciprocal and making sure that everybody is the same across the board when we're doing these reciprocal licenses. We feel comfortable with the changes that were made in the Senate and the minimum standards required to prove that in different jurisdictions. So we're comfortable with that. We like the bill. We think it's a great way to improve the free exercise of commerce. And like Chairman Burkhart said, you know, contractors are in high demand, and we just think this will be helpful to allow contractors to exercise freely throughout the state. And with that, I will take questions.
Any questions for Ms. Little? Any questions? Okay, thank you. Why don't you just stay there for right now? Next, whoever.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tammy Johnson with Wyoming State AFL-CIO. I just wanted to answer your question about the electrical. I've been texting our electrical guys since the question came up. The electricians in the state are required to take the state electrical exam, and so that's the licensing thing that they go through, so the ICC wouldn't really apply. And also Wyoming, the state also has the same test for a Wyoming electrical contractor's license. So whether you're an electrician or an electrical contractor, you have to take that exam, and then that gives you license for the whole state. So I suppose the fees are county to city specific, but the licensing is managed by the state, so.
Okay, so Ms. Johnson, so your interpretation then is that we don't need to call out electrical contractors specifically in this piece of legislation?
Mr.
It's
Chairman.
already covered in effect.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I think I would also say you don't need to call out any specific trade because without those, if you read it, the bill would encompass those, but you don't need to call out electrical. It's covered. Thank you.
All right, anything else?
No, sir, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Bob McLaurin with WHAM. We too support the bill, work with these associations and with the building officials across the state. And we think that it's a good idea and it works. So if you have technical questions, we have the City of Cheyenne building official here on the front row who can answer any of those specific technical questions. But we did work a great deal with his association, getting the bill in a shape that would work for all of us. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions? Questions? So you're asking me to do what I usually do, which is to call on people who happen to be in the room?
Well, he knows more about it than I do,
Okay.
so.
All right, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jessie Defoe with the Wyoming Contractors Coalition. And I'd just like to, stand in support with our counterparts who have been up here and to thank the good work and effort that's been put into this bill. We agree with the accountability for contractors. We appreciate the amendment that went in. Thank you to Representative Conrad for asking that clarifying question. That was the only one that we had, was if consideration was given just to Wyoming contractors, if this was a nod to resident contractors or not, but either way, we appreciate what this bill does and moving forward, just to reduce regulation, streamline business, and to be pro-business in the Cowboy State. So thank you for your work and hearing this bill.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. DeVoe? Questions? No? Okay. Next. Go ahead, Erin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Era Arano, Wyoming Outdoor Council, and we support this bill. We appreciate the streamlining and regulatory requirements. And there's a number of federal grant programs that could benefit Wyoming's residents, including the home energy re-rate programs, which could bring over 70 million to small businesses and homes for increasing energy efficiency and really helping decrease the utility bills, which we know has been a problem. So we encourage you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's nice to see you without your scooter.
Thank you.
It probably feels good to not have your scooter.
Feels real good.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Well, you're the last one, I think. Somebody will run up at the end of the meeting, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Anthony Pomerlo. I am a licensed contractor in the city of Cheyenne and have been so since early 2000s. I have began as a building inspector since 2008 and am currently serving for the city of Cheyenne as the chief building official. I've been involved in the review and amendments proposed to the bill, and as it currently stands with the amendments, I'm also the vice president for Wyoming Conference of Building Officials and have had conversations with numerous individuals serving in jurisdictions across the state, and we all stand okay with the bill as it's written with amendments. Sir, I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions? Any questions? Okay. No? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Lawley, seconded by Conrad. Discussion on the bill. Any discussion? So Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just make the point that I really appreciate the good work of the Senate and the amendments that they did. I think it really improved the bill. Thank you.
Okay, and Representative Conrad.
Chairman Brooker, just a question on page 3 on specifically line 16. Are we sure that our nation, our federal codes align with all international codes, for example, EU, et cetera? It denotes international codes. That was my only question.
Okay. I think I can answer that one, Representative. We often quote those international codes. We quoted the International Building Code, I believe the International Plumbing Code, and I think another one in previous legislation, so I think we're good. Okay, so for committee, for your benefit, there are a number of communities in Wyoming where the community itself requires a separate business license for every contractor. So a contractor who's licensed in one community and has done work maybe throughout the state cannot work in that community without a separate community license, and it's caused some problems with what companies are doing. For example, some companies that are located in numerous communities throughout the state have one contract to service, say, their refrigeration equipment, heating, air conditioning equipment, and that. And right now you have contractors who are probably, they're pushing the envelope, working in a community that requires a separate license, but they don't have enough work in that community to pay for a separate license. So I think this helps get rid of that, and that streamlined stuff makes it able for all of our contractors to work throughout the state in a much easier manner. Okay, let's see. Any amendments to the bill? I won't go through it page by page. It's only 6 pages. Any amendments? Okay, committee? Question being called by Lawley. Mark, would you please call roll? We're voting on Senate File 114 engrossed, contractor licenses, reciprocal recognition agreements.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Chairman Burkhart,
Aye.
9-0, do pass.
Okay. Oh, we have passed. Just 1 minute, Senator, if you would. We've passed out of committee, Senate File 114 engrossed, contractor license, reciprocal recognition requirements. And go ahead, Senator, because I was going to ask you a question anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner is the co-sponsor that I was expecting to be carrying this on the floor. He's a co-sponsor and he's on the Minerals Committee, so I thought that made sense. And we can see that Representative Heiner was not a participant in this conversation. I was wondering if any of the other members of the committee would be interested in floor sponsoring it, having had the benefit of the public comment. I see Representative Conrad.
Okay.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll still give it to Senator, we'll still give it to Representative Heiner. I can visualize him nodding yes, saying he would accept it, but in his absence, Representative Conrad will take it.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, that was my question to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, committee, that wraps up committee meeting. Anything else to come up? And again, we will do interim topics on Wednesday with our counterparts from the west side of the building. And that, so if you have any additional ideas, as we've talked, I always give committee kind of first crack at those things. So thank you. We are adjourned.